South Africa's Basic Education Department is facing dilapidated infrastructure challenges in schools. This affects academic performance and also infringes on the rights to education. It also has a direct impact on learners' dropout rates and low teacher retention rates. According to the Department of Basic Education, out of 23,471 public schools, 20,071 have no laboratory and some do not have internet. Well, to discuss all of this is Senior Research Specialist in the Equitable Education and Economies Research Division of the Human Sciences Research Council, Dr. Andrea Juan. Doc, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. I mean, poor infrastructure will not in any shape or form contribute to the development of equitable education in our country. What is your research showing?
Thanks for having me, Dan, and talking about this really important issue. I first want to acknowledge that substantial improvements have been made by the government in terms of infrastructure. The statistics you mentioned are from 2018. So the most current 2023 report from the DBE has lower numbers. But the statistics that you speak of speak to poor school infrastructure, unsafe learning environments, school premises that are vulnerable to crime. The COVID pandemic really highlighted the lack of sanitation when it emerged that some schools didn't have access to water for hand washing. These challenges disproportionately affect poor Black children, especially those living in rural areas. Our research from the 2019 Trends in International Mathematics and Science study, we examined the relationship between access to infrastructure and academic performance. And the results are what you would imagine. There's a statistically significant link between attending a school with a laboratory and science achievement. The same can be said for learners having access to computers for instruction and mathematics achievement. So generally, we found that in schools where principals said that school infrastructure was a serious problem, performed much lower than learners in schools without problems.
Yeah, you're saying the numbers have improved since the numbers are used that are constituted from an earlier year, but there's still gaps. I mean, and the government the DBE had come up with a plan, I guess, to accelerate the addressing of issues of infrastructure. Where are the biggest gaps from your research? What are you seeing? I mean, for example, is it in sanitation, like pit latrines, or is it in a lack of libraries, or lack of laboratories, or a lack of media, internet connectivity?
I mean, schooling is a myriad of issues, and I think everything that you've discussed is important. The norms and standards that were promulgated in 2013, mainly through civil society organizations like Equal Education, pushing government into promulgating this legislation, has deadlines for eradicating, mud and asbestos schools, and that was in 2016. I don't think that deadline has been met. The norms and standards also prohibit the use of plain pit latrines at schools. And we still have hundreds of these schools in the Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and KZN. So yes, you're right, the issues still exist. And it's interesting to see that there are also budget cuts when it comes to school infrastructure. Yes, there's dedicated funding. There's grants for infrastructure, the Accelerated Schools Delivery Initiative, ring-fenced money. But then in 2020, 1.7 billion was cut from the school infrastructure grant and allocated to COVID expenses. So from the government, there is an acknowledgement that these problems exist, that they are linked to educational outcomes. But we are also seeing poor implementation. We look at the Eastern Cape, where poor work by implementing agents results in schools being built that can't be used. And the department's failure to hold these service providers accountable for poor delivery.
Yeah, the other day I was listening to Actually, yesterday I was listening to Elijah Mhlanga speaking with my colleague Masiho Rahlach about this whole issue. And then he mentioned the issue of crime and vandalism that many of these schools' infrastructure fall victims to. I mean, it looks like communities should really step up to protect some of this infrastructure. If, as you said, there's progress, Doc, over the last few years in some respects, but then there's crime and theft and thuggery that happens, and vandalism is taking us back all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we can't get away from that fact. Sometimes during service delivery protests, schools will be burned. Schools are easy targets when it comes to crime and theft because, you know, over the school holidays, there's no security in that. But that can't detract us from the fact that we have such big backlogs in infrastructure. And there needs to be a push on the side of government to address these backlogs. Yes, schools are based in communities, and from the schools I visited in my fieldwork, you do see community ownership. You do see parents volunteering their time to help build a school, for the school to be a place that they're proud to send their children to, that their children feel they can belong in. But I think just looking at vandalism is maybe detracting from the issue of the backlogs.
Yeah, finally, Doc, from your research, I mean, you've mentioned earlier the correlation between good infrastructure that's needed in terms of certain subjects like maths and science in our schools. What, in your view, is currently the biggest impact in terms of our pupils and in terms of teaching due to poor infrastructure in our public schools?
That's an interesting question because we have to get the basics right. We have to have toilets and access to water and safe buildings for learning to take place so that teachers can deliver effective instruction. But looking towards the future, we need to think about how we prepare learners for the technological revolutions that are taking place. But how can we do this if we're not getting the basics right? We talk about future-proof education, where learners will eventually enter into jobs that currently don't exist, or work in technology that hasn't been invented yet. But yet learners are drowning in pit latrines. And there's a kind of a juxtaposition here and looking forward, but at the present, we really need to get the basics right because we are doing a disservice to our learners and our country if the backlogs are not addressed.
Yeah, and somehow it seems we might be killing the future of our children, especially in this new technologically advanced world that you've referred to. Thank you very much, Dr. Andrea Juan of the Human Sciences Research Council.